going on, everyone? 60% of the S&P 500 closed up in the green today, and we are set for an exciting end to the week. The SPY is fighting pretty hard at the $600 level. Investor sentiment data just had its largest move in 15 weeks. Yields are starting to crack, and we have a handful of stocks that are setting up pretty nicely for tomorrow. As we know, we only have one more day left of the week, so let's make it count.
Yeah, Mike, the overall market actually had a pretty good recovery day today. We can see that a lot of tech stocks were ripping to the upside. Nvidia ended up ripping all the way up to 145, which is a very key level for them. And as we go back to the heat map here, we can just see that a lot of the bigger tech stocks had pretty decent moves, whether it's Microsoft, Oracle, Apple, Nvidia. And then there was just a lot of nice green action out there, really helping that recovery effort. The SPY ended up having that really great move back up to 603.50. I know that we talked about that level a whole bunch yesterday, and a lot of people today again were like, okay, well, if yesterday was so bad, what happened this morning? And what ended up happening is we ended up getting some PPI data releasing, and the market found this to be pretty positive. We saw the market shoot up a little bit from that, and then from open, we just had that full-blown recovery. But Mike, I would say right now, one of the craziest things that I saw today hitting the news is Trump hitting at Powell, calling him a numbskull, saying that he's urging him to do an interest rate cut. Trump is actually saying here that interest rate cuts are costing the United States $600 billion a year, and that by lowering rates by 2 percentage points, we could save that amount of money. But in Trump's words, we can't get this guy to do it, referencing Jerome Powell here. So I find this situation pretty funny. Trump's been attacking Powell the past few months, and of course, he's been pushing for rate cuts. And you know what? We got some inflation data this week that showed that inflation was not near as bad as we thought. So, like, it would make sense that Powell could maybe do a couple rate cuts and, maybe give up the inflation side here for a little bit. If inflation starts to get bad, then, hey, go back to pausing.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting over these next few weeks because, as we know, the 90-day Liberation Day tariff pause is set to end on July 9th, which will make this whole situation much more interesting. But on top of that, if we look at the CME tool, we could see that interest rates are actually priced in to get cut starting on September 17th, which, is a lot sooner than I think most people figure.
Yeah, me too. And with it being a 59% chance right now, we got to keep in mind there's a 59% chance of a 25 basis point cut. There's actually a 15% chance of a 50 basis point cut right there as well. I know Trump was actually calling for Powell to cut by one whole entire point. Could you imagine that if there was a one whole point cut? That would be pretty insane. And I think that that's why we're starting to see some of these other percentages for a 50 basis point cut and even a 75 basis point cut start to come in. Granted, the chances on those two are very low, but still, I think that it's something that should be looked at here in the short term, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on Jerome Powell to get this cut going, and I think that that's really what fueled a lot of the optimism today is traders looking at interest rates falling. We can see that right now, if we go to the 30-year yield, it's actually starting to peak off here on the daily chart. It had an all-time high up around 5.15%, and we can see that in the short term, it hit right around that same mark and is now falling back under the key 5% mark. That's a pretty big level that scares a lot of traders out there. So I'm definitely looking at this situation, looking at the yield starting to fall down, Mike, and I'm like, okay, this could end up being a situation where, traders get pretty optimistic here as interest rates start to fall quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's pretty exciting because as we saw earlier this week, inflation data came in lower than expected at 2.4% year over year, and Trump just wants Powell to turn those money printers back on, lower those interest rates, and get growth spurred again. So it should be pretty exciting, and I love to see yields falling like they are.
100%, and I think that this could end up being a trend that continues. As we zoom out, we start to look at these double tops, and the last time that obviously the US 30-year started to fall from this point, it fell down quite a bit, all the way back to 4%. I'm not really saying that we're going to get a drop that steep again, but at the end of the day, I do think that there could be a drop in the short term that could end up spurring some potential buying pressure in the market, kind of like what we saw today. And Mike, we got some AAII data that came out today that ended up showing that it crossed above 3% for the first time in 15 weeks. And we can see that in the periods and the weeks following this data, we generally see a lot of bullish sentiment come in. 1 week later, the market's green 80% of the time. It's actually green 80% of the time until we get to 3 months later, and then it jumps up to being green 100% of the time. So, and there's only really one really bad outlier year here, being February 8th, which is 2023, where we had, those 3 bad readings there, 2 weeks, 1 month, and 2 months later. But besides that, the data here is very bullish, and overall, we're starting to see sentiment shift. Sentiment was recently at lows, and I know that we brought up a lot of these charts, Mike, and talked about sentiment being at these very low levels, and seeing it starting to shift back up here is a pretty cool sign.
Seriously, and for those of you who don't know, what AAII data is it's basically survey data on the opinions of individual investors. So when we see it rising like this, it definitely shows, like you just said, Tom, sentiment is changing in like a pretty big way pretty quickly, and I love to see those forward returns.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome when even like whenever you go out to 1 month later, the market's average percent rise is 1.8%. That's pretty awesome. And whenever you go to 2 months, it really jumps up to 5.37%. I thought that jump from the 1 month later reading to the 2 month later reading was pretty significant there. So I will be watching it as we start to go forward here. And as we go back and let's just say, look at the overall market really quickly. The SPY has been doing pretty good. We know that it's very close to all-time highs. The all-time high is up around 613. Today, it started to make this great recovery. Of course, there's still a good shot that the SPY could end up posting a lower high and rejecting up here. So I just want to keep that in the back of everybody's minds. It's something just to be aware of. We always like to look at everything here as we start to go forward, but there is a lot of data pointing to some buying here. And Mike, I know that we looked at some buying data yesterday. I wanted to show again that just kind of shows that the big boys out there are starting to buy a lot as well in the short term, which I think is even just helping fuel this trend even more, obviously.
Definitely. We have multiple different data points coming in pretty favorably. We have the hedge funds rushing into the market at a basically record pace. Inflation data came in good. Yields are falling, and it's looking like we're going to get a rate cut pretty soon. So we'll definitely cover the specific SPY levels as the video goes on. But Tom, as I'm sure a lot of people already know, Boeing had some horrible news today where they had a really bad accident in India. Their stock is tanking. What is going on here?
Yeah, this is definitely a pretty tragic and sad situation where there was a plane crash in India today. More than 240 people were killed. I saw that there were 240 people on board, and there was actually one lone survivor that was found from this. So I am pretty struck to see this whenever I woke up today, Mike. It's something that definitely worries me with Boeing stock. I know that there's been a lot of talk about their planes having issues the past couple years, and there's definitely going to be a big investigation underway with this. Boeing did say that they would cooperate with the investigation, of course, but at the end of the day, whenever you have this amount of deaths and planes crashing out there, it's not the best thing for Boeing stock. It closed down 4.79% today. It started to rip up, actually, when the market opened and held its ground a little bit, where I was looking for more of a downtrend to come in. I did notice that right as the market opened today, Boeing was holding a key support at $200, and the low of day today is around $197. I do think that there could be some really good opportunity playing Boeing to the downside over the next few trading days if it does end up breaking under this key support range. That is a pretty big level at 200.
Yeah, it really is such a horrible situation, and I think in a trading sense, I think it says a lot how there's a lot of unknown information at this point. So if we get more updates, especially if this crash is something that Boeing is significantly responsible for, that can definitely bring some crazy moves to the stock, but it's definitely on my bearish radar as well. I think everyone should be watching it, especially as new information gets released, related to the situation.
Yeah, and looking at it on the daily chart just a little bit further, it's very overextended in the short term. Looking at Boeing, I know that we've been talking about them quite a bit because they've been ripping to the upside from recent lows, they were up around 70%. That's a pretty good move by Boeing just over the course of a couple of months, pretty much from like the beginning of April. So it is starting to turn over a little bit. I do think that just it being overextended alone could end up bringing it to the downside. And I am watching a key level of support coming up right around $190, where I do think that we could slow up. We've seen a lot of hits and price action around there with Boeing in the short term.
And another good thing with Boeing specifically is that when it moves, its options tend to do pretty well in both directions, so it is pretty good for trading normally. So definitely keep it close on watch. But Tom, we talked a lot about the market overall today, and I think we definitely should cover some specific levels going into tomorrow. Looking at SPY right now, what are the key levels you're seeing? I know we're still close to 600, but we're definitely holding pretty strong off of it.
Yeah, yesterday we talked a lot about the 603.50 resistance. We ended up seeing a great recovery today out of the SPY in a test of that key 603.50 resistance. So that's going to be the biggest level that I'm really watching for tomorrow. If we can see a great break above there, I will be watching for 605 to 606 where we ended up hitting yesterday. So the SPY had that great recovery move today. I think it threw a lot of people off guard, especially considering that, let's just say the SPY gapped down this morning again. It had a pretty bad gap down under 600 actually, down to 598. So I'm definitely going to keep my eyes on 598 and 600 closely like you alluded to there. That's going to be a very important support. If that ends up breaking, I think that a lot of sellers will start to rush in as the market is slightly overextended. But that recovery today really showed the market strength in my opinion, Mike. I know that we've been seeing a lot of selling pressure the past 2 trading days, but as we zoom out over the past few weeks, things have been extremely bullish, and it was really good for this run to keep that going today.
Yeah, I definitely agree there because, we had a pretty weak close yesterday. It was gapping down in pre-market, but it ended up like completely reversing, and it definitely showed a lot of strength there. So it definitely is good to see. We will definitely keep a close eye on all the levels you listed. But looking into tomorrow's events, what is on the schedule?
Yeah, 1 day left of the week. We do have Michigan consumer sentiment preliminary data for June set to release, and that'll actually be pretty interesting in my book, Mike, because everybody right now is worried about sentiment and what is going on in the overall market, what traders are feeling. So that'll kind of give us a gauge on like what people are thinking right now in the short term. On the earnings side of things, of course, it's Friday. A lot of times Fridays are pretty slow, and that's the case again here.
Sounds good. Well, let's get right to some setups and predictions then. A stock that is close on watch is NEM, and it is to the upside. For those of you who don't know, this is a gold mining company, and gold prices continue to march higher today, especially as some tensions in the Middle East are definitely rising again with Iran. Basically, gold prices have an all-time high at $3,500 per ounce, and gold prices were at like $3,385 per ounce today, and it was uptrending pretty nicely. Of course, as you'd expect, this definitely has a positive influence on gold mining companies like NEM, and I really like the short-term price action, so it is definitely on my bullish radar for tomorrow. Even for a gold mining company, which is normally a lot more boring than, let's say, your hyped up tech stock, NEM moved up by just under 5% today, which is very good. So it's definitely on watch.
Yeah, we've been seeing some great moves out of NEM in the short term, Mike, and especially today, that almost 5% move was fantastic. And, we had a few really good green candles on this overall uptrend recently as well, and it is approaching a pretty big resistance that I'm watching for a major breakout at, so I'll be keeping it on the radar with you. But with my first setup, I'm watching Tesla, and this might make some people sad out there, but I'm watching it to the downside, actually. I noticed today they had some good momentum to the upside this morning, but I did not like the way that they closed down here. And as we zoom out, we can see that they are a little bit overextended over the past few days. There is this big support around 315 to 316. If we can see this support give out, that's where I'll start to look at Tesla in a bit more of a bearish way. I know that they were ripping back up earlier this week as like the Trump-Musk feud cooled down a little bit, but I didn't like that bearish price action today one bit, especially as the SPY actually held up pretty well. I thought Tesla selling off was a bit negative there.
Exactly, and it tried to run up in the first half of the day, but those sellers came in pretty strongly and drove it all the way down to a new low of day. So it'll definitely be close on watch. Another stock that is definitely on the radar is Carvana, and it is to the downside. It fell by 5% today, and the stock is having increasingly bearish momentum. It rejected hard off resistance right around $350, and I could definitely see a retest of that like 312 support area, and like especially if like a stop is put around that like 327 area, I think it could make for like a nice like a good risk reward setup in the short term. And I especially like the weak price action that we saw today. It basically fell all day long right into close.
That was massive today, and I love that 330 support break. And man, I'll keep my eyes on some of these levels coming up in the short term. That like 310 to 312 support is definitely gonna be on watch here. But with my next setup, I'm watching Nvidia here, and you know this one, we have the Bookmap. We were looking at Nvidia earlier this week on the Bookmap, and I don't know if you guys noticed this, but there was a ton of sellers stacked up at $145, almost 3 million. There was 2.7 million today, more specifically around the end of the day. If we're able to get a massive breakout of this $145 resistance, I think Nvidia could continue up in the short term. We have seen a lot of positivity with the SPY over the past few trading days, and if we do see like a good breakout here, that would be exactly what the SPY needs to continue its uptrend as well and get through that high of this week's. But either way, Mike, Nvidia had a great close, and I love this 145 resistance where there's nearly 3 million sellers stacked up. It's not every day that we can say that on the Bookmap either.
Very interesting, and Nvidia really did crush it today. And as we all know, Nvidia is known for some solid movement, so we'll definitely keep that close on watch. And besides that, Tom, let's jump right into today's momentum plays. And with the first one, we have Applied Digital, ticker symbol APLD, to the upside.
Yeah, if Applied can break above the 1310 high of day, then watch them up just above that $13 resistance.
All right, with the next one, we have Coinbase, ticker symbol COIN, to the downside.
I noticed Coinbase sold off pretty hard today. It's straddling the $240 support. If it can break under 239.50, then watch it down.
And then with the last one, we have Barrick, ticker symbol B, to the upside.
Yeah, these guys changed tickers a little while ago. They used to be GOLD. Now they're ticker symbol B, but they were up 3.4% today. If they can break above $21.05 at the high of day, then watch them up.
Sounds great. So as always, the stronger and more consistent these stocks move, the better these setups become. But as always, prioritize protecting yourself above all else. Protect capital, have tight stop losses, and worst case scenario, if you get stopped out too early, you can always re-enter. But besides that, Tom, I think it is now about that time to jump into today's $680,000 big money trade. And we are looking at ticker symbol XLU. For those of you who don't know, this is a utilities ETF, and this has a nice long history of consistently uptrending. Basically, the trader here bought the 85 strike call options that expire on September 19th of 2025. They are a little bit out of the money, but they have a good amount of time to them. So especially if we see a continuation of this short-term bullishness, it can definitely be a pretty interesting trade.
Yeah, it can. XLU is pretty interesting here, Mike. I will say utilities is not the sector that I was expecting to see have such a pretty good uptrend in the short term. I will say as we zoom out on XLU, it has been holding up and it's been pretty consistent here, but it's been fairly flat the past like 6 months or so. There's this major range that it's stuck in, and I think that the big money trader here is really looking for a breakout up above this recent high and double top. And the reason why I really think that is that they went with the 85 strike calls here, and the top is right around 82 to 83. So if we start to really break 83, we'll pretty much be around that $85 mark, no problem. There is some time on this one out to September, around 3 months, so you do have to give it a little bit of time. But with it straddling this resistance, I would not be surprised if it started to break out through that pretty soon. Just the only like slight concern I have with it is just that strike being 85, slightly out of the money, slightly worrying there. But like I said, if we do break this recent high, it'll be a pretty easy to get to 85.
Beautiful, beautiful. So let's definitely keep this one close on watch. But if you guys are new to the channel, definitely consider subscribing so you can get our videos recommended to you more often. Every single day we cover the most important news, information, chart setups, earnings, important events, and basically everything you have to know about the stock market in around 20 to 25 minutes or less. We also showcase a lot of cool charts that you'd never otherwise see. So definitely consider subscribing so you can hear from us more often. But we also want to give a giant shout out to today's member of the day, Craig A. in the StockedUp Discord, who had some very kind things to say and who has just been crushing it lately. So huge shout out to you, Craig. Thank you so much for all of the kind words, and keep on rolling. As we know, we only have one more trading day left of the week. Let's trade smart, trade disciplined, stay adaptable. And as always in this Trump news-driven market, keep your eyes out for news and breaking information, as that is what has been the main driver of price movement this year. Thank you all so much for watching, and let's crush it in the market tomorrow.